about various different industries and work that we do. But when I reached my manager year after completing my manager 1 year, I entered what Deloitte calls a management development program. And what it's really intended to do is to excite and re-energize managers and basically teach them what we do outside of the core business, and then bring them back into the business and apply that new skill set. So I left audit for 2 years within Deloitte. I joined our CFO program, and that program is designed to understand what keeps CFOs up at night. What is top of mind for them, crypto being one of them, I know that was on the agenda, and ESG being another. So after working in this group for 2 years, I knew that that's where I wanted to pursue the rest of my career, and I'd like to do that within the audit practice. So when I went back into audit, I vocalized that interest and applied for a role, and here I am. And at Deloitte, we have ESG umbrellas underneath: audit, tax, consulting, advisory. So my background is specific under the audit practice. So what is ESG, right? You have environmental, social, and governance. We'll talk a bit about the structure of that, not just those 3 pillars, but a little bit more broadly. We'll talk about the current state of ESG and where we foresee it going in terms of regulations and requirements. We'll talk about accounting for ESG and how it's really relevant to the accounting and audit professions. And then I'll take you through Deloitte's ESG journey, the technology that we use and where we're at and some of the targets that we intend on meeting. So what is it? Environmental, social, and governance, right? So everyone is pretty familiar with those 3 letters, but there are many other pillars that fall underneath there. So when you think of ESG, you should really think in this broad sense. This is pulled from the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, and they use these 5 tranches to best define ESG. So E is what's really driving the car right now, or driving the conversation in many regards. I think mostly because it gives companies and C-suite executives some anxiety. They're not as familiar with the bullets that fall underneath the E here: your greenhouse gas emissions, air quality, waste and hazardous materials. I mean, these are things that they're not very comfortable with pulling data for, summarizing, reporting that data, and then asking for assurance over it. So that's what's really kind of driving the conversation right now. And when you think ESG, try not to limit it to just climate. The S, the social capital and human capital, while that's not necessarily new, it's new in the way that companies have to reconsider some things that maybe they put in place years ago. So their human rights compliance, data security, customer welfare, and then labor practices, employee health and safety, DE&I. So these topics seem, more in the headlines now because we have to make sure that they intertwine with changes that you may have made as it relates to the environmental piece. And then when you think of leadership and governance, again, not new, right? These companies have business ethics, competitive behavior. They very routinely do risk assessment. And now the conversation has shifted to, well, do we have to reconsider the things that we've done before because we have new practices in place for the E and the S structure that have recently been implemented. Same goes with business model and innovation. I mean, you'll see the bullet on supply chain management. Obviously, in the past few years, that has been a hot topic, given that supply chain issues have run rampant, right? There's been the COVID-related issues, the war in Ukraine. A lot of companies have struggled with getting the supplies needed to operate their business. So reconsidering of supply chain management is also, generally part of an ESG structure. So I wanted to hone in on the E just for a moment. So one of the bullets there was greenhouse gas emissions. And so to try to take some of that anxiety off those who maybe aren't as familiar with the ESG environmental specific topics, greenhouse gas is the hot topic. The greenhouse gas protocol, which was established to better define how to account for greenhouse gas metrics, they put categories into 3 different scopes. So scope 1 being your direct emissions. So I like to think of it as maybe a shipping company, right? A FedEx or a UPS. Their direct emissions would be their fleet, right? In order to operate their business, they have to actually move materials using cars, using transportation. So that's a very direct form of emission for a company like that. Whereas scope 2, indirect, more purchased materials, Maybe a similar company has a headquarters, right? And they have their HR department, their accounting department, finance, marketing, you know, they're all sitting there behind a desk and maybe don't look like the day-to-day operations, but really are driving the business. And in order to make that headquarters run, you are purchasing electricity, you're purchasing heat and cooling. So that contributes to your scope 2 emissions. And then scope 3, the one that has the most gray area, there's 15 categories of scope 3. You know, broadly, it's defined as anything other than the scope 2 indirect emissions. And when we get to the reporting requirements later on, you'll understand that the SEC has provided a little bit more leeway when it comes to scope 3 because it's harder to track and harder to measure for companies and likely will be costly. So I'll use one example. I mean, at Deloitte, we do a lot of corporate travel. Admittedly, we do our best to, you know, staff people on engagements that are in their local office, but sometimes you get put on an engagement that you have to travel for. And so, you know, employee commuting might be a scope 3 emission for us. And it's something that while I might individually have an environmental footprint that is part of my travel, that's a contribution to Deloitte's overall scope 3. So as you can imagine, those are going to be really hard for companies to gather data on and report on, but over time, it will be part of the requirement. So the S, I had mentioned a bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion, health and safety, and cybersecurity. These are some of the hot topics people think about when they think of the S. I mean, what's new-ish now is that companies are being bold and reporting metrics. You know, if they're saying that they want to increase diversity in their workforce and they put a percentage there, it'll be part of our job to understand how they plan to achieve that metric. Do they have the right people in place? Do they have the right plan and control in place in order to achieve that? And cybersecurity, I mean, who wants to invest in a company that is constantly going through various data threats, right? So you have to kind of reconsider some of the things that maybe have been baseline or standard for a company, but considering this within the framework of ESG is sometimes not thought of because, as I mentioned, I think a lot of people just relate it to climate and sustainability. And the G, I included this slide just to give a little perspective on the governance structure for a lot of companies. Your C-suite executives, you know, that's fairly standard across the board, but what's new is the addition of a chief sustainability officer. And again, I'll say new, it's not new for all companies. Many have had one in place, but definitely newer, and we're definitely seeing more of this now in the market. That person, they might have a different background than others in C-suite. They might be a little bit less finance-based and maybe have had experience in their specific industry as it relates to specific climate matters or other social matters. And so having their perspective woven into the conversation with their board of directors, with other C-suite, and with overall management is really important in order to achieve all of the things that they're trying to achieve.